Hello everyone, this is Siddesh Bhagwe. Welcome to my channel. Last video that I posted, I talked about decision making, the factors that are going to affect your decision making and the process, the intuition and the reasoning process. This video I'm going to continue it further into the next step, something known as the framework of effective decision making. So hang on with me. It's a 7-step process, and I hope these steps are generally used in big organizations to take effective decisions, but I don't see any problem be using them for our personal growth. The important aspect of the whole exercise is to go through all the stages without missing out any of them. This is just to facilitate the relevance of each point, whether they are useful for your particular situation or scenario you are in. Let's get started. The very first topic I want to talk about is listing down the possibilities. This is nothing but a dynamic thinking process which involves using tools like mind mapping or brainstorming. It's very important to note down the ideas that you get excuse me, because these ideas will eventually be opted for the course of action. And sometimes it's important to consider that not making any decisions or doing nothing are itself a potential answers to some of the problems that we are trying to tackle. After listing down, second comes the time scale or time framing and deciding who is responsible. Time scale is very important, and to set a time scale we got to ask a certain questions to us. How much time is available to make a decision? Is there a particular deadline to make a decision? And if there is a deadline, what are the consequences if we miss the deadline? Is how important is it to make a particular decision? Sometimes we can say that sometimes making quick decisions is more or sometimes making good decisions or right decisions actually helps, and sometimes it's the other way around. Responsibilities, like we talked in the last video, how if we have too many people around, there will be a lot of many opinions, and if we have more opinions, they become eventually obsolete, and it leads to zilch. And that's the reason we should always have a formal agreement among the members of the group to choose a person who is responsible to take a particular action and avoid any incendiary acts. The third one is gathering information. As we talked in the last video of decision making also, if we have too less of the information or too much of the information, both can lead to confusions and irrelevant data. So it's always important to gather enough data. The data should always be relevant, it should be accurate, it should be authentic and up to date. And we got to always verify our data that we are trying to collect. Also keep in mind, while collecting the data, the amount of time that you are trying to invest in them versus weigh the risk factor that is involved if you take a wrong decision. That leads us to the fourth point, that's about weighing the risk. So weighing the risk is basically how much risk are we willing to take in a particular decision? What are the consequences of making wrong decisions? What are the long-term hardship that we will face regarding a particular decision if it goes wrong? Not only that, we should also consider the worst outcomes of the particular decisions and what are the chances of having those worst outcomes being repeated. So those are the first 4 points. The fifth one is values, deciding on the values. Each person have grown with a certain values, and over the period of the time they have been addition of values as well as subtraction of values, and it's highly likely that persons or people, or the leader I will say, who is responsible to take decision, is always inclined to his values. So decision making can also be a factor about trusting your values, and that's the reason we should always fix a person who is responsible to take decisions. Next point is about pros and cons. It's always important to distinguish the advantages versus the disadvantages. Sometimes if the decisions are very crucial, or the factors, scenarios in which they are involved in, it's better to maintain a balance sheet. Balance sheet is nothing but putting down your pros and cons on the either side, and then rating them on the scale of 0 to 10, where 0 being the least important and 10 being the most important. And that's how we will know what factors, or what pros and what cons, and how much do they affect to a particular decision making. The final step, seventh step, is about making the decision. So far we learned very first is mind mapping and listing down all your opinions. Second one is to set a time frame and try to get your work done within the time frame. Decide who is responsible to take decisions. Then we saw how to gather data, and what kind of factors we should keep in mind when we are collecting the data. That is the weighing of the risk involved. And finally, we have also noted down what kind of pros and cons are related to the factors of the decision making. Supposedly, you are the person who is making the data, who is going to be responsible, who actually is going to take the final call. After noting down everything, you go through the whole scenario, you go through all your documents and everything, and sometimes the answers are very clear to you, but still somewhere you feel you lack confidence to take a call. And that's the point when you visit your intuitions, because your intuitions already know whether the decision is going to be in the favor of the values that basically you are practicing. And finally, after the decision has been made, never have the notion what could have happened or what should have you done to improve it. Just accept whatever is going to happen and move on. I would like to give you an example of what Mr. Ratan Tata himself has said. Let me quote it for you. So, Ratan Tata said this: "Apart from values and ethics, which I have tried to live by, the legacy I would like to leave behind is very simple. I always stood up for what I considered to be the right thing, and I have tried to be as fair and equitable as I could be. I have also read what Ratan Tata has said: I don't believe in making right decisions. I take decisions and I make them right." Thank you so much for watching my video. If you like it, please give thumbs up. Comment in the comment section. Let me know what you feel about my video. Do subscribe to my YouTube channel and press the bell icon for the future notifications. Thank you. Stay safe.